Hello and welcome to the first Scrum Show of 2025. I'm recording like 3 shows in the next like 30 something hours. So, plus I never released a baseball show this week, so that's coming out next week at some point. Sorry, bud. Nathaniel Arfin. Can I just start by bitching about the Ontario ONDP? We're talking about Ontario. We're doing like an Ontario year in review. My buddy Ben Out's coming on tomorrow to do federal year in review and a sort of like draft gimmick for 2025 because I come from the Bill Simmons school of draft everything. So that's gonna be fun. But Arfin, I've decided to have you talk about Ontario because obviously I've written a lot about the feds. Haven't really, dedicated much time to the provinces in recent times. We are not touching the federal discourse with a fucking 10-foot pole because honestly, I can't even engage. See my Twitter feed for all my drunken musings these days. The Ontario NDP are just like flat out lying. They claim that they have a $10.4 million war chest to fight Doug Ford. They don't. They had $2.2 million at the end of last year. They've raised between donations and the public funding a shade under $9 million. Well, let's just round up and say $9 million, okay? So that is theoretically, that's $11.2 million, right? But that assumes that they spent no money. In 2023, they spent $4.2 million. So that would be if they'd spent the exact same amount of money. If nobody in the NDP got a raise and nothing else happened, that's $7 million in surplus. Now, it's possible they didn't spend as much, although in theory, I believe the NDP claim that they've increased their advertising spending a little bit, which you would think they would for an election year. Also, generally big increases in donations. Like you can't just infinitely increase the amount of money that you are raising without increasing your costs. At least somewhat, but let's be nice to them. The Ontario NDP are lying by at least $3.5 million, probably, about how much money they actually have to spend in a war chest to fight Doug Ford. Is it as clear and obvious to you, one, that they're full of shit, and two, what does it say about Merritt Stiles that she has to resort to lying?
I'm not sure that it actually does say this much about Merritt Stiles. I mean, the Liberal Party has been doing the same. The Ontario Liberals have been doing the same now for at least the time under Bonnie Crombie's tenure. It seems like it's become this calm strategy move to just let the press run cover for your financials while reporting the real financials has somewhat become an exercise in, I don't know, they're doing it because they have to do it, but nobody cares about the self-reported, transparent financials. And it bugs me that we just have these reporters running these stories on the word of the party. Of course, it bugs me that the parties are themselves running it, but it's like we have these tools for financial transparency in our politics, and we just don't take them seriously.
Like, it's probably not a good thing that I want to say it was Colin DeMello, whose tweet was the one that the Ontario NDP quote tweeted. But, it's probably not great that Colin DeMello's contribution to this is to just tweet the screenshot of the NDP press release uncritically.
But at the same time, we really should be expecting more from these political leaders. It's very
part of the reason that we don't have it, that there's no reason to expect anything more from political leaders, is that the political press don't do any form of effective scrutiny.
I would agree.
Political parties acting in their narrow self-interest should be expected, right? We should not expect them to act, for our better angels. It is up to the press to force political entities, right, to act that way. and the sort of like weird notion that like, oh, it's the party's fault. Like, I mean, it is their fault in a sense. It's also like good politics if you can get dumbasses to parrot your false talking point. But like, seems pretty likely to me, given that the Liberals get about the same in government funding as the thing. We know how much Bonnie Crombie raised just from the leaders' dinner alone. You know, if the Liberals had even a remotely decent Q4 outside of the leaders' dinner, they probably have more net cash. Like, they probably just do. And like, it's just one of these things where it's like, if the press culture is just post the press release on Twitter, then what are we doing here and why? I mean, I guess it's just Stiles is pretty sort of like doesn't have a good answer because she's third in the polls and pretty clearly has no traction with the electorate, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, Marit Stiles is clearly slipping. They have basically nothing to rely on other than the continued unpopularity of Crombie and Ford. They haven't proposed any new policies. They haven't been an ambitious opposition. They act like they are still running for the opposition. And until they start coming together with real ideas and breaking through with something, I guess we can expect more BS from them on their PR side.
You mean a completely unfunded Homes Ontario plan that does not make any amount of sense whatsoever at unit cost and would probably cost literally a factor of 10 greater than what they've claimed is not a serious policy proposal.
It also got buried behind Bonnie's actually good housing policy.
No. The relaunch of the policy got buried under Bonnie's actually genuinely very good housing policy. Because remember, they tried to launch that shit in 2023 and then didn't talk about it again for a year. And then tried to relaunch it when the housing nerds were sort of like hinting that Bonnie has like an actually good housing policy coming up. And that got buried because her policy actually makes sense. And also you didn't have to give Bonnie Crombie your email to read the plan. That was my favorite part of the relaunch of Homes Ontario. You literally could not get like the policy backgrounder or the costing document unless you gave the NDP an email. Like you could not literally physically access the page. Whereas, Crombie was, actively giving reporters like, hey, you want the like full backgrounder? Here it is.
Because you want people to know about your ideas. The ideas come first.
And also because when you have good ideas, it's very easy to be like transparent and clear and have validators lined up, right? Like, it was the same thing with Trudeau. Like in 2015, when all of his math actually added up and everything else, and the childcare was being paid for through combination, I think it was the conservative universal childcare benefit. I think it was like income splitting and something else. Like they were perfectly happy to release this, big, costings document, large number of pages, all the numbers added up. They were very clear about to pay for this, we're cutting that, or to pay for this, we're raising this tax. Now, some of the numbers didn't turn out to be true, but, at least on paper, the math added up, and they were very willing to show it because they had the math to propose it. Spoiler alert, the Liberals were not nearly as forthcoming about certain costly political gimmicks, to quote Christopher Freeland, because again, they knew they were hawking a shittier policy. It's the same thing with the NDP. They know their housing policy is a joke, so they're just trying to hope that nobody actually looks at it under scrutiny. But it's not even just housing policy. You're not enthused by the safety zones around drag bars proposal. That doesn't captivate you.
I didn't realize that was a proposal, and
You don't,
yeah.
you not listen to me? I've been bitching about it since they held that press conference.
I mean, why do you make the worst decisions possible? You're ostensibly a Labor Party, and you just continue to fight battles that, one, you're not going to win, two, are completely unpopular and don't change anything for anyone, and three, don't play to your core base. Start being a Labor Party.
Because they're not a Labor Party.
How
many times do you have to do this? They're not a Labor Party anymore. They're a party of they're a party of blue-haired social liberals that also win Oshawa and Timmins, or they don't win Timmins anymore, but out of essentially just inertia. But they're not a Labor Party anymore. You can keep saying, "Oh, but they're a Labor Party." Well, they act like a Labor Party because the second that anybody in the NDP tries to support labor rights in an unpopular way, Andrew Horvath going on Power and Politics and defending the charter rights of unvaccinated teachers, the party has a fucking meltdown and makes her reverse it within 24 hours.
Basically, the NDP are a complete sham.
Do you want to do the line? Do you want to do the line? Should I do the line?
You should do the line, I think.
They're two parties stuck together by first past the post that don't know what the fuck they want to be.
And they're getting worse at it on the regular. And it's getting bad.
Because the wrong people have won. Because the wrong people have won the war. They're trying to be liberals, but slightly more left wing, which is not a useful place in the political. It's just plainly not a useful place, because it's just like, say you're just trying to fight over seats that the conservatives could never win while bleeding seats to the conservatives, right? Imagine if the NDP actually just rolled back a lot of the social liberalism, stopped giving a singular shit about Israel and Palestine, and embraced a sort of Horvathian charter rights of the unvaccinated. We don't give a shit about your social politics, but we want more money for rural hospitals sort of approach. Rural, small town, whatever hospitals. Imagine all those seats they could win back. Those would probably be quite helpful if, the NDP had a plausible path to winning the one Thunder Bay and the Windsor seat that the Conservatives won, holding Oshawa, winning Timmins back. Wouldn't that be a useful thing for the left if they could, rely on the variegated anti-Ford opposition, if they could rely on, winning some of those seats back instead of basically needing to sweep the 905?
And this is the big thing, is a lot of people talk about the potential for these two parties to join. There are people who don't want to have to suck it up, who don't want to have to vote against what they believe is their conscience. And the Ontario Liberal Party is never, ever, ever going to be that party on the left that you described, that does truly care about labor rights and workers' rights and fights for those things, but also cares about the social good policies in rural Ontario. That's never going to be the Liberal Party. So the NDP either has to figure it out.
But the problem is that the NDP are trying to basically be liberals with more of a conscience, and it's that's not electorally useful, because all you end up doing is getting into the spat with the liberals, for the same 12 seats, right? It's Beaches, it's Humber, it's Ottawa Centre, it's West Nepean, it's the university seats, Kingston, London North Centre, would be Guelph if not for Mike Schreiner and the Greens, right? Which is fine if all you want to be is perpetual opposition. If you want to defeat the Liberal Party and drive them extinct, sure, that's a solution. But the problem is the NDP has not thought in the slightest about how to appeal, how to win Brampton, right? They have no idea how to win Brampton. And that's the problem, is that the NDP are so focused on winning the battle with the Liberals and trying to win Beaches, right? Or trying to win Kingston, that they have actually no strategy to win 50 seats.
The ridings where they should already be the default choice.
They have no seats. They have no seats in Brampton, which is 5 ridings, I believe. They have no seats in Mississauga, which is 6. They have no seats in Halton. And by the way, they have basically no plausible chance of winning seats in any of these places in the next election.
That's exactly it. So,
and like, they're losing in Hamilton. They're losing in Windsor. They might lose a London or 2 at the next election. Like, and they're losing in Northern Ontario. Pick a fucking lane. How do you want to win? You want to win government? How? Where? Name me 63 seats. Because you don't fucking know what your strategy is to 63. What is it? Pick one.
Yeah, at this point in time, the NDP, their plan seems to be become the better half of a coalition against the Liberals. But the Liberals don't have a path to forming that other side of the supply and confidence. It's not there without the seats that the NDP take.
Because the problem is that the Conservatives, because even if the Liberals have a better night than I think either of you expect, right? Sweep Mississauga, split Halton 2-2, win a bunch of other 905 seats. Like, I think in that star piece with the Doug Ford or the Bonnie Crombie profile from the end of November, early December, I think they were talking about like 35 Liberal seats, right?
Yes.
So the thing is, and I've had similar numbers told to me by Liberal insiders. They think they could get there. Now the problem is that there's like a pretty steep like drop from 35. Like, it's really, I can see a path to 35. I can't, like, getting to 45 is really significantly harder, right? Like, there is like a pretty clear drop from 35, sort of deeper on the target list, as it were. The game's still in there, but let's say they get 30ish, right? They win most of the target seats, a few incumbents here and there hold on, right? The problem for people who want to get to 30 to get 63 is, okay, the Conservatives lose 20 seats in that, right? They lose a bunch of, again, couple, maybe even win a couple Bramptons. You win Eglinton Lawrence, you win 2 Etobicoke, you do this, you do that, you knock out a bunch of Conservative cabinet ministers and a bunch of, whatevers. Maybe you even win Carleton, maybe Goldie runs as an independent against 7% and Liberals come up the middle, right? Maybe. Well, the problem is if the NDP are going to lose Windsor West and the other, Thunder Bay, they're going to lose Oshawa, and they're going to lose a London, and they're going to lose Hamilton West, and they're going to lose all of these sort of like right trending, small, like sort of like smaller working class cities. There's no path to to beating the PCs. Even if the Liberals have a great night in the suburbs, there's no path because the NDP are fucking incompetent.
Yeah.
Explain to me why the announcement today about the former safe injection site sucks so much? Because you were mad about this. Explain it to me.
So we have heard that the former safe injection sites will be transitioning into heart hubs, or sorry, I'm trying to remember the actual name for the acronym here. It's homelessness and addiction recovery treatment hubs. These are excellent treatment centers that help a lot of people. They were piloted in London, Ontario. They do a great job providing people with connections to housing services, on-site housing, food, water. It's a homelessness shelter that offers health and recovery services for people with addiction. These, as a replacement to safe injection and and safer supply sites are a complete failure. And trying to present them as an alternative for those sites is cruel and callous. What this demonstrates to me is that they're not actually concerned with having people who are suffering from homelessness. They're not afraid of having drug addicts in the neighborhoods that apparently drove this decision to close the safe injection sites near schools, because those people are still going to be around. Just now, they don't have access to the life-saving medication, don't have access to the life-saving safe supply of needles. All they have access to is the integration to care, which was already a portion of safe supply and safe injection sites. So effectively, you're taking away the life-saving nature of what these hubs were, and you're doing so under the guise of community safety, but you're not actually doing the things that the community wants to see done to make it more safe.
So I have two sort of broad takeaways on this, and this is as somebody who, like, safe injection has never been like a hugely animating force in my politics. It's partially that I'm a suburbanite at heart, like born and raised. This has never been an issue that I have had to experience. And so the thing for me with this is sort of that's my sort of biasing in coming to this. But I think the two things I want to say is, one, how much of this is you just litigating the original decision, right? Because what you're saying is that it would be better if they were still safe injection sites, but they're not, right? That we've lost that fight for now. So is the decision to use these for something useful better? Like, you're comparing it to not having closed them as safe injection sites in the first place. Is it not better that you have these heart hubs than to have nothing at all?
I absolutely think it's a good idea to be reusing community resources this way. Saving money to make use of the community resources that way is a good idea. The problem with it is that this was billed as a way to keep homeless people and drug addicts away from kids.
This was going to be number two. If the point of not wanting them within 200, is it 200 yards?
200 meters, I believe.
200 meters of schools. Which, again, I would just like to point out, there are pawn shops within 200 meters of schools. Okay. That seems bad.
Yeah.
Because literally, God. So, by where my elementary school is, there's you basically, you can walk off the school grounds. There's a baseball diamond that my mother used to play softball in. And then if you cross the street, there's it's like a Max, and there's a Lorenzo's Pizza, and there are, I think, multiple weed shops in that one plaza. I don't know if it's actually 200 meters, so I assume it is. But no, it is absolutely fucking hilarious that, like, you can do that, but whatever. Here's my point. If the point of closing safe injection sites was to reduce the chance that your 9-year-old walking home from school was going to encounter somebody who's high on drugs, right? And who is experiencing the consequences of being high or of having overdosed or whatever, because there's a safe injection site there. How does having a heart hub, like, isn't the case for a heart hub, like, isn't that also going to bring addicts and people who, by the government's logic, a logic that I don't agree with, but quote unquote unsafe people, like, haven't you just defeated your entire fucking purpose?
Well, that's exactly it. It's it's pretty clear that if the goal was making neighborhoods safer, that they would have gone about this in another way. They could have moved safe injection sites somewhere else and offered the same level of care, but instead they're offering a different level of care in the same neighborhoods, which attracts the same type of person, which is someone experiencing homelessness or someone who is an addict. So to me, the government is spitting in, they're spitting in their own faces here. They're spitting in their constituencies' faces, and they're helping no one. They're making things worse.
I mean, okay. I don't necessarily believe the argument I'm gonna make, but I feel like safe injection is going to end up being one of the fall lines in this election whenever it comes this year. Which we'll get into the whenever it comes this year in a bit. But like, is it not an unreasonable public interest in reducing overall drug consumption, even if doing so necessarily impacts people's freedoms and liberties?
I think that there are a lot of arguments there. You do have the right to self-autonomy and all that.
Yeah, but you don't have the right to self-autonomy at the expense of the law. Like, what we are talking about when we're talking about safe supply is people who are breaking the law, and for whom we have decided that it is not in the interest to enforce the law. Like, let's be real. The people for whom safe supply helps are people who are using illegal drugs. And we have decided that it is in a greater interest to, let's be honest, completely disregard the fact that they're breaking the law.
The reason that we care less about the individual actions of people using drugs and more about the overall scope of the drug crisis is because taking action against the individual is often harmful, more harmful than good. We don't have the room in our prison systems, and more often than not, these addictions should be treated as health issues, because that's not only.
Should we have the balls to legalize hard drugs instead of this wishy-washy sort of like policy?
That's a different conversation. If we're having a conversation about why we prioritize the type of life-saving care that we offer now, what we're saying is that we don't have the medical facilities, we don't have the care facilities, we don't have the infrastructure in place to take care of people who are addicted to drugs and who are, frankly, breaking the law by purchasing and carrying out illegal activities surrounding their drug activities. But that acknowledgement is somehow being twisted into let's put them all in jail. Let's not take care of them. Let's let them die.
Why does one class of people who's breaking the law deserve divertment and another deserve jail time? Why we decide the drug users deserve compassion in a way that others don't?
I think one part of it is the recognition that addiction often is a health issue, and the other side of it.
But again, the law does not make that distinction. Politicians acting flagrantly in violation of the plain text of Canadian law are deciding this in a way that we would never find acceptable if we were just like, actually, everybody who if we were to just make sweeping diversions for essentially any other class of criminal, right? We don't do this with prostitution, right?
We must do, though. We mostly do. Prostitution is basically it's one of those things where it's de facto understood and recognized as being a flourishing industry. And when they do go after when they do stings on prostitution, it's more often targeting human trafficking than it is the individual workers themselves.
Partially, but that is because of a Supreme Court ruling within the last like 10, 11 years. That is like, that was not the pre 2013 or 2014 consensus. Like, but again, that's a capacity issue, right? Like the reason we don't have politicians defending prostitutes' rights in the way that we have politicians defending drug users' rights.
I would agree with that.
And so my question becomes like, and I think this is like, I'm definitely taking a position that I don't generally believe, which is to say, if we can save people, like my actual position, if we can save some people's lives for, pennies, just functionally in the rounding error of what a government is, save supply is, a funding non-existence, like we should do it because that's a good thing to do. Right. But like, one of the things I wrote a piece about this, trying to explain why young voters moved away. And one of the things I'm thinking is like, it's pretty easy to characterize people who are pro safe supply as prioritizing the rights of drug dealers or drug users over others. And I'm not necessarily sure why that's a position that we feel as comfortable with politically as we do.
Well, one of the big things about protecting individuals who are addicted to drugs, obviously in the wake of the opioid crisis, and I'm not sure if you've seen it, but basically it all starts oftentimes with medical professionals oversupplying or overprescribing, or even just regular prescriptions of opioid-based painkillers. And that leads to addiction in places that would otherwise be unexpected. Now, that's not to say that's all cases, but that is a reason why there is generally more sympathy, or has been more sympathy, towards people who are addicted to opioids, I think, because it is so common in regular day-to-day people. It's not this dark, devious choice that people are making. Oftentimes it stems from medicine. The other side of it is that most people who are using drugs regularly are otherwise not performing criminal acts. And the creation of poison drug supplies that we're seeing is a result more largely of other organized crime within the country. For example, we know that China is using the drug trade to fund other aspects of their organized criminal business in BC. That's something that we know.
Yeah, but at the end of the day, like, we're going to talk about self-autonomy. People still have it is extremely rare that someone is forced to use cocaine, right? Like, yes. It is very rare that somebody doesn't make that original choice themselves.
I would agree with that. And there are instances where, we see stuff like the snoots being given out in BC. Like, those are kind of weird choices. And it's like, there are definitely questions about what we're doing in terms of safe supply. I mean, there's a lot of great community resources where people can get drugs tested in the community, things like that. But those things don't need to be government funded necessarily. I think the community has done a good enough job creating those types of resources. But I also think that when it comes to poison drug supplies like the opioids, the government does have a responsibility to step in, because there is more of a moral imperative to saving millions of people. And that's
Well, we're not talking about them, but we're not like. I just like we need to win. We need to beat Doug Ford, and I don't think either of us think that is actually possible. But I just this is the kind of thing. I just don't know. I just don't know how you sell. I just don't know how you sell a position of wanting people to continue. Like, I just don't understand how you sell the idea that these, hard hubs are a bad idea. Like, at what point do you have to consider involuntarily putting people into treatment?
Well, the problem with that is the problem that we have with the voluntary treatment. We don't have enough supply. It doesn't matter. Like, you want to put people in jail for drug use? We can't find room in our jails. We're putting people four to a room in 2 to a room cells in our jails right now. We don't have space. And
but if the offer is we'll increase the capacity for dedicated treatment facilities, we will increase the supply of it, but also involuntary treatment is coming down the track. Are people going to think that's a bad trade-off? Because that kind of feels like where the politics on this are moving.
I really hope that people do understand why that's a bad thing and why that is an erosion of personal freedoms.
But the thing is, you don't have personal freedom to do cocaine.
Typically, we're not talking about cocaine here. Usually, we're talking about people who are regularly using opioids. And while you don't have the right to use opioids regularly, just taking away people's supply kills people. People will die. And that's what it comes down to is, are we saving lives? Are we taking care of people? Are we providing them with the treatment that they need to get healthy? Or are we putting them in jail, using up state resources that would be more efficiently used in providing care, essentially to take away their rights to be the people that they are?
Essentially bailing them out of their own decisions. That's the case against it. That is the fundamental case against it. Do people deserve protection from their own mistakes?
It's not the way I frame it. I would frame it.
I'm not.
I understand.
I'm aware of that fact, because when you frame it that way, it's like your position becomes a hell of a lot harder to make.
Yeah, because it's kind of awful.
Is it untrue?
Well, it
again, I agree with you on the substance of the point. I'm just pointing out that this is a heavy lift politically.
I think that your framing of it would be an easier sell on it to the people we're trying to sell on it.
But I'm basically doing my impression of what Stephen Lecce is going to keep saying when he is inevitably replaces Doug Ford as Premier of Ontario in 3 years.
But that sounds like an argument against it to me.
That we're bailing people, that Safe Supply is bailing people out of, like, the people do not actually deserve the right to have the government fund, bailouts that are on mistakes.
Well, to me, what it sounds like you're actually saying is,
I'm saying that the public will not indefinitely support people being bailed out of their own mistakes.
But I don't think that the people will accept paying for mandatory treatment in the same vein. If you wouldn't pay for it when it was offered for free or offered as part of your taxes, then why would you pay for it when it's mandatory? Because
people would much rather, because the other thing is, of course, is that all of this intersects with the homeless encampments issue, right? No, not everybody in an homeless encampment is a drug user. Not every drug user is homeless. I'm aware of this fact. There is a significant overlap between these two populations. If the pitch is involuntarily get drug users out of homeless encampments and into treatment beds, or fuck it into jail cells, the public will be very on board with that. And I think they would be significantly more on board with that than safe supply, which is very easily sort of ridiculed as people as enabling people's mistakes.
But again, what do you do with those people? We don't have room in jails. We don't have room in shelters.
Do you think the average Ontarian gives a fuck about where they go when they're no longer in their city's makeshift tent city?
Well, they will when they start committing crimes out in the open rather than in the makeshift tent city. People are going to find somewhere to live.
That's the point of involuntarily confining them.
But when it comes to where they will be confined,
do you think anybody's going to give a shit if we're four to a rooming in a 2-bed cell?
I mean, clearly not, because that's the case right now, and people are still calling for more jail for people out.
I mean, in fairness, violent crime is up pretty significantly in Canada since Trudeau took office. Like, it is unfortunately an undeniable fact. Do we want to talk about Brian Lilley? Okay. Do you have a take on Brian Lilley sort of seeming to float a trial balloon of maybe Ford won't go to an early election before I explain my understanding of the state of play?
I'm not surprised by that, but
do you agree with me that it's a trial balloon?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, anything that comes out of Lily's mouth is effectively a trial balloon.
So what I have heard from people of multiple ideological and political persuasions is that Ford has never been as personally on board with the idea of going early as certain advisors. The advisors who want to go early tend to be very good at their jobs. Ashley fucking Corey Connectly wants to go early. Doug Ford has always been a little skeptical of going without a reason. Fuck it. No one listens to the podcast. It's fine. I wouldn't write that in a column. I'll say it on the butt. Corey wants to go early. Doug has always been a little wary of it. Lily is obviously, up Doug's ass. And I think the Trump tariff stuff has scared Ford at the very least. I think they don't want to get Peterson. I think that is the thing they're deeply scared of. And Corey, as far as I'm aware, his belief is it doesn't matter. You need to go before Trudeau goes. Because if you have to run a campaign with Prime Minister Poilievre, that is a significantly harder campaign to run. And that is like my understanding of the state of affairs. Now, obviously, I have already been vaguely threatened to be sued by a conservative once in the last 2 weeks. Nick Kuvalis completely misunderstood the point I was making on Twitter. Nick, on the 0% chance you're listening to this, I did not mean it the way that you thought. I did not say that your numbers were crap. But if you ban public polling, right? If you stop Keto Maggie and why the fuck? Who runs Abacus? I literally have had him on this podcast. David Coletto. The rum is kicking in, okay? We're recording this 59 minutes before the Sugar Bowl, okay? I'm drunk and gonna get more drunk. If you ban Keto Maggie, David Coletto, the guy who runs Liaison, and Joseph Angelino, that's him? The Palace guy? Old number 2 at Main Street?
I can't remember his name, but Yeah.
If you ban public polling, what you're going to get is not detailed, detailed policy work, right? Like the column images are not going to be replaced. What it's going to be is you're going to get leaks and you're going to get sort of like half measures of what the public says. Now, I will actually give Nick Valis a lot of credit for this. When he or somebody in the government or in the PCs gave the LCBO strike polling to the government, or to the Star, I should say, the polling he had done for Ford, he actually did quite a lot of disclosure, more disclosure than you generally get from private polling reported in X newspaper, right? We got vote intention numbers. We got a lot of issues, questions, right? Like it seemed like the full memo was given out.
Yeah.
But if you ban public polling, what you're going to get is selective disclosure, right? Because obviously you're going to disclose the numbers that look good for you, and you're not going to disclose the ones that look bad for you. And we know this from America, where we see all the time internal and campaign and private polling get released. And like the number of stories that people hear, right, where it's, oh, why was this? Oh, this one congressperson put out a poll, or, congressional candidate put up a poll showing them up 6. They lost by 4. And you'll ask somebody, and it'll be like, yeah, no, their polls were down 4, down 5, up 6, down 4, down 5. But the only poll they released was the up 6, right? Like it's not reflective, and you would never know if it's reflective. Whereas at least with Coletto, who releases a monthly poll, you have an ability to track trends, you have an ability to come back to questions, you have an ability to do it, and you don't have to make subjective assessments about Nick Valis or I actually don't know who does internal polling for the Liberals or the NDP, but like you don't have to make internal assessments about the partisanship of them, because we have pollsters with good public track records. And I don't want a world where the only times that we get glimpses of vote intention is when Robert Benzie can get his hand on a memo from somebody, right? That's not a good way of going about this.
I mean, it's certainly the way some people would hope that we would get our polling information.
But people are idiots.
Yes, I absolutely agree that there's a lot more value in the way that we do things right now. It provides us with the opportunity to push back, to challenge it, and to look at it a bit more critically. Whereas internal numbers, oftentimes you don't know the name of those internal pollsters, and you don't know the way that they're sourcing that information, because a lot of it is proprietary. It absolutely makes a lot more sense for us as a public to be able to criticize and critique the numbers that we get this way.
And if you're a progressive in a province where tactical voting is a thing, I would like to have that information. Also, like leadership, one of the reasons that leadership contests can be unpredictable, of course, is that it's significantly harder to pull leadership contests, right? We don't have a primary system. It's a close list. There were, rumors and reports or whatever, vaguely sourced in the Star. The Bonnie Crombie was, right on the door of 50%. She got 43. Now, if the poll said 46, I don't know what the poll said, because we never actually got a number attached to it, right? Now, if the poll says 46 for Crombie and she got 43, like that's like objectively not that bad of a result.
No,
right?
It's within the margin of error.
For sure, especially when you're dealing with like a very complicated contest like this. But it's also fair to point out that like part of the reason that was, that was as close as it was, or Aaron O'Toole winning, right? Remember when Leslie Lewis was, first in votes after the first on the second ballot?
That would have been
Now,
horrifying.
third in points, admittedly, because of the dumb system, but nobody thought Leslie Lewis was like that high up. Nobody. But part of the reason was that we had no reliable polling of the membership.
Absolutely.
Or minimal. Mainstream might have run one poll, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's hard for the public to react, and it's hard for members to react without
and
the
it's hard,
information.
and it's hard for people to make the correct decisions, you know? And so I think that the anti-polling shit's crazy to me. Do you think Ford does go early?
I do, but not as early as previously thought.
Well, I think part of the other thing is and I don't want to talk about it, but like if Trudeau resigns tomorrow and announces that he's going to prorogue till March, right? That buys the PCs more time if they want to go on this side of the Liberals being in office federally, right?
I would agree with that. Yeah,
because presumably, if you're Ford, you would want to call the election the week before Parliament returns. If you're going to call it, if Trudeau by my birthday, by January 20th, by the swearing in of the new president, if Trudeau's still there by then, and I don't think he will be, I'm just going to lay my cards on the table here, but if he is, then if you're Ford, you're going to want to go that week, right? You're going to want to get to the lieutenant governor and go, because Trudeau would fall pretty quickly if he stays and he doesn't prorogue and he doesn't call leadership race.
And it's a good way to get us all nice and fatigued going back-to-back elections.
Right. But if you're, if Trudeau, my sort of timeline or thing would be sort of like the Liberal leadership race is wrapped up by March 1st, new cabinet, the beginning of the week of March break, Parliament's back the week after March break, right? Well, then Ford would have another 2 months to make a decision. And the feds would presumably kind of wait a couple weeks, right? The NDP would probably vote for the throne speech and then vote down the budget or something 2 weeks later to just because none of these parties are ready to run two campaigns at the same time. None of them. For all the tensions that exist between Poilievre and Ford, it's 85% the same activist base. It's certainly significantly the same donor base, right? You just can't run two campaigns at the same time. You can't. So you would buy another month or so. But unless something shows up in their polling, and obviously we won't know this, but unless something shows up in their polling saying that if they go now, they're going to lose, or it's not as guaranteed they're going to win, it just would make so much sense for me to go if I were advising them, that I can't see them not doing it.
Yeah.
And also, let's be real, Corey Konechny tends to win fights if Corey Konechny really thinks something is a good idea, he tends to win that fight. My point?
It's going to be a tough fight, no matter who or when it comes, or how it comes. But I just don't see how the NDP is able to rally in time, and even the Liberals are able to raise sufficient funding if it does come down to an early election.
Yeah, I think honestly both progressive parties would have real funding problems. Nathaniel Arfin, thank you for coming on. Follow me on Twitter at @Scrimshaw. Follow the Scrimshaw Show on Twitter at @Scrimshaw_show. Political writing and general thoughts at scrimshaw.substack.com. I'm hoping to have solutions to where I will be writing about sports soon. For me, like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. Arfin, you're the greatest. Happy to have you back on. You and I are hopefully about to record the football show, but I don't know if we have time. So if there's no football show this week, frankly, week 18 is kind of a shit show. So we'll see about that. Thanks for coming on, buddy.
Thanks for having me.